She hid who she was. He seemed unshakable. But not all masks can hide the truth forever. When everything that seemed solid begins to crumble, is it possible to rebuild something even stronger? This is a story of love, secrets, and overcoming obstacles that will keep you hooked from start to finish. Emily walked through the company's large lobby with a mix of calm and resignation, as judgmental voices echoed around her. Cruel comments about her appearance were relentless. "Who is that awful woman? My God!" someone whispered with disdain. "Is that Mr. Ethan's wife? How can he look at her and not get sick?" Another person scoffed. The words, though familiar, brought a pang of pain that Emily forced herself to ignore. Her husband, Ethan, was a renowned architect, admired not only in their country but internationally for the impressive projects he created. Emily, the daughter of a businessman and a teacher, lived on the fringes of her husband's grandeur. Their marriage, arranged between their families, was more of an agreement to unite interests than one born of love. To make matters worse, Emily wore outdated clothes and applied intentionally exaggerated makeup, doing everything to appear undesirable and keep Ethan at arm's length. As she moved through the lobby, a woman whispered to a nearby group, "It's ridiculous what she does to get attention." Emily quickened her pace, ignoring the scene that repeated itself day after day. But the words still echoed in the hallways, a constant reminder of her discomfort. Upon arriving at the reception area near Ethan's office, she was greeted by the familiar warmth of Roa, a trusted employee. Roa kindly informed her that Ethan was in a meeting and offered her something to make her more comfortable while she waited. Emily thanked her with a shy smile and walked to a nearby mirror. There, before her reflection, she adjusted her disguise. The fake pimples glued to her face, the thick eyebrows, exaggerated eyelashes, and voluminous wig were a barrier she used not only against external judgment but also against her own husband. As she chuckled softly at the false image she'd created for herself, Emily felt something unsettling creep into her thoughts. Deep down, she herself began to question who she really was behind the distorted version she insisted on showing the world. Shortly after, Ethan's presence silently filled the office. He exuded his classic serious demeanor, his natural elegance showcasing the weight of responsibility he carried. Emily then stood up, a mischievous glint in her eyes, a slightly mocking smile playing on her lips. Ethan, however, cut right to the chase, asking what she was doing there, analyzing her from head to toe with his usual cold stare. Emily replied indifferently, saying she just wanted to visit him, to which he returned the question with a hint of suspicion. She retorted, asking if he'd prefer someone else visiting him instead. Ethan stopped what he was doing and for the first time stared fixedly at her, as if trying to gauge something beyond her words. He stated with a firmness that frustrated her, that their marriage wouldn't end, no matter how much she wanted it to. Emily scoffed at the idea, laughing as she walked around the room. She questioned how he wasn't ashamed to have a wife like her, so tacky and deliberately unkempt. But Ethan didn't take the bait. Calmly, he closed the subject, reaffirming that regardless of what she did or said, the marriage would remain. Annoyed, Emily tried to force him to open up more, mentioning the debt of gratitude he owed her father. Her tone was sharp, almost as if she aimed to hurt him. Ethan, however, remained serene, explaining that for him, The arranged marriage had never been a game or something to abandon. His conclusion was simple but loaded with sincerity. As his wife, Emily was irreplaceable, and he would never seek anyone else. Ethan's words caught her off guard. Emily tried to hide her surprise and the slight emotional turmoil she felt hearing that. She replied sarcastically, suggesting that if he didn't want to find someone to replace her, she could find a candidate herself. Ethan sighed, visibly annoyed by her attitude, but ended the conversation with his usual serenity, saying she could do whatever she wanted, but nothing would change their marriage. Indignant, Emily announced she was leaving, to which Ethan casually replied that the driver was already on his way to pick her up. While waiting for the elevator, Emily noticed eyes on her again. Always hostile, they seemed to judge her for something she didn't even fully comprehend. In the car beside the driver, Bruno, she tried to reflect. Why did Ethan, with every reason to get rid of her, keep insisting on staying by her side? Does he really like me? She murmured softly, still confused by her own thoughts. Upon arriving home, she found Ethan waiting for her. He observed her carefully, noticing her disguise and sighing as if carrying a heavy burden. With a calmness that irritated her, he questioned why she insisted on presenting herself that way. Emily, in turn, provoked him again, asking if she disgusted him. Ethan smiled faintly, as if he'd already anticipated the provocation, and simply told her to eat and get ready early in the morning, as they would go out together. The unexpected proposal intrigued her. When she questioned his motive, Ethan merely replied that she would find out at the right time. However, before ending, he made something clear. Regardless of all the excuses or traps Emily might continue to create, their marriage was already a done deal. Emily continued to analyze the man in front of her, feeling increasingly confused about his feelings and her own. Ethan seemed unshakable, an inexplicable fortress she didn't know how to overcome or even comprehend. But deep down she couldn't help but wonder, what does he really feel for me? Emily swallowed hard at Ethan's response and looked away towards the window, trying to hide the faint blush creeping up her cheeks. Quickly, she adjusted her old-fashioned glasses and straightened the intentionally dowdy clothes she'd chosen to annoy him. Despite her discomfort, she exited the car with firm steps, maintaining a confident posture. As soon as they arrived at the main building, Ethan went directly to an important meeting, while Emily made her way to the pantry. She knew she always attracted judgmental and scornful looks when she was at the company, and that day was no different. One of those stares came from Rochelle, an employee known for openly showing interest in Ethan. Rochelle smiled maliciously, reveling in Emily's presence. Rochelle made sure to provoke her, using a mocking tone as she wondered aloud how Ethan hadn't left her yet. "You must have bewitched him, didn't you?" Emily remained calm, stirring her juice, then cast a lazy glance at Rochelle and calmly suggested that perhaps it was Rochelle who was consumed by envy. The provocation irritated Rochelle, who laughed loudly and scoffed. "Envy you? I'd sooner envy a real laundress." She pointed to Emily's intentionally disheveled appearance. Maintaining her composure, Emily simply responded with an ironic smile, which made her rival lose patience. Rochelle stepped forward and shoved Emily, causing the juice to spill onto her clothes. Emily, however, didn't lose her cool. Looking at her stained clothes, she coldly remarked that Rochelle had won. Yes, she was everything they said, someone who didn't deserve attention. But when Rochelle persisted, provoking her again and saying that she only mattered there because of Ethan, Emily calmly replied, "If being strong means living with your bitterness and insecurity, then I prefer my insignificance." The retort hit home. Furious, Rochelle tried to intimidate her again, grabbing Emily's arm. Emily reacted quickly, pulling away and tightly clutching her wig to prevent her disguise from falling off. Rochelle, at the height of her rage, screamed that Emily's appearance matched the trash she was. Suddenly, a firm voice echoed through the room, cutting the tension. It was Ethan. His presence instantly silenced everyone around them. He walked towards the two with anger in his eyes and demanded, "Who gave you permission to touch her?" Rochelle tried to justify herself, but Ethan wasn't having any excuses. "I've made it clear, no one touches her. If this happens again, everyone here will be held accountable," he stated, raising his voice. He turned directly to Rochelle, emphasizing that her rivalry with Emily was reckless and that they needed to discuss her behavior. Without leaving room for answers, he escorted Emily to the elevator. Despite feeling uncomfortable with Ethan's protectiveness, Emily couldn't help but wonder once again who he really was and why he kept acting this way towards her. In the following days, Emily noticed that the atmosphere at the company had changed. Employees began avoiding her, fearing Ethan, treating her as untouchable. She didn't know whether to find the situation ridiculous or amusing. However, something caught her attention. Nathan, Ethan's brother, was in the office. Emily knew they had a tense relationship, but something seemed off. She saw Nathan discreetly leaving Ethan's office with a white folder, which raised her suspicions. When she mentioned it to Rhea, a colleague, she was told that he was looking for something. Emily, however, didn't trust that explanation. Days later, her suspicion was confirmed. During an important meeting, Nathan presented a project that was eerily similar to Ethan's. His confident demeanor was evident, and he seemed to savor his brother's silence as he showcased his material. Ethan, on the other hand, maintained his characteristic calm, but Emily sensed the tension in every movement. When it was his turn to present, Ethan began by saying that a possible coincidence could explain the similarities between the two projects, but he still wished to present his own vision. He spoke in a controlled manner, not betraying the emotions bubbling within him. Emily watched him carefully, admiring her husband's composure, but noticing the disappointment on his parents' faces. After the meeting, Emily felt she couldn't keep the information she knew to herself any longer and decided to confront Ethan. In the hallway, she pulled him by the arm, insisting they needed to talk. She reported Nathan's suspicious behavior, including the folder swap she had witnessed earlier. Emily was direct. "I saw Nathan entering your office, messing with documents, and carrying a white folder that shouldn't have been there. That doesn't look like a coincidence." Ethan hesitated, his expression revealing internal conflict. Trying to justify the inexplicable, he replied that he didn't believe his brother would go that far. Still, Emily insisted that he should open his eyes and take it seriously. Emily stood firm as she recounted her discovery to Ethan. She looked him in the eyes and reaffirmed with conviction, She had seen Nathan messing with his belongings and swapping one of the folders. Ethan, however, listened with hesitation. He seemed to struggle against what he was hearing, as if he preferred to believe his brother would never be capable of such a thing. But the tension was visible. Finally, he shook his head, arguing that he and Nathan had promised never to cross certain lines. Emily, frustrated with Ethan's insistence on defending his brother, pressed on, her voice filled with indignation. Ethan looked away and justified that it could all be a coincidence, making it clear that he wasn't ready to accept the truth yet. This stance caused even more displeasure in Emily, who questioned him about what he would do if Nathan acted suspiciously again. Ethan sighed deeply, showing his weariness with the situation. Without answering, he mumbled that they should leave the matter for another time and walked down the hallway, leaving Emily standing still, reflecting on Ethan's denial. A few meters ahead, the couple crossed paths with Nathan, who seemed to be waiting for them. Leaning casually against the wall, he displayed a provocative smile. His defiant posture was evident when he addressed Emily, accusing her of trying to defame him to Ethan and suggesting that she was twisting the truth. Emily, however, remained calm and replied sarcastically, stating that she didn't need to try to ruin what had already been ruined for a long time. Nathan's smile quickly disappeared, replaced by an irritated expression. He took a step forward, his threatening posture clear, and called her insignificant, questioning her legitimacy to interfere in any family matter. Emily didn't back down and stared directly at Nathan, daring him not to underestimate her and warning him that he needed to keep her family out of his schemes. Emily's last words seemed to hit a raw nerve. With a cold face and a firm voice, Nathan replied through gritted teeth that this was far from over before turning his back and walking down the hallway. In the following days, Emily decided she wouldn't give up on protecting Ethan. Though he resisted seeing the truth, she knew something bigger was at stake. Returning to the company, still wearing her mask and wig, she entered determined to remain vigilant. However, as soon as she exited the car, she was brutally grabbed by a burly man. "That's her," Rochelle informed, pointing at Emily with pure fury as two other men accompanied her. Rochelle quickly approached, her voice laden with bitterness. "She's the reason I lost my job." Emily froze, trying to understand what was happening. One of the men held her arm tightly, while the largest of them stared at her with contempt. He menacingly asked if she had any idea who she was messing with. Emily pulled her arm, trying to break free, but her resistance was crushed by her assailant's strength. Rochelle screamed, ordering them to rip off Emily's wig, wanting to expose her. Before Emily could react, the man yanked off her wig. Long wavy hair was revealed, along with a surprisingly beautiful and flawless face. Those around them, including Rochelle, were dumbfounded. Rochelle, who had until then displayed hatred, could barely whisper, "My God, is that her?" Emily, though impacted by the situation, tried to regain her composure. Holding her wig, she stared fixedly at Rochelle and with firmness warned, "If you touch me again, there will be no escape for you." At that moment, Emily spotted Ethan's car approaching rapidly. Panicked, she screamed, "Ethan, help!" The car screeched to a halt, and Ethan exited in a swift, determined motion. Seeing Emily being held, he advanced without hesitation, landing a punch on the man holding her. The assailant staggered backward, and Ethan positioned himself in front of Emily, facing the others with controlled fury. Shortly after, the building's security guards arrived and surrounded the men. Ethan found a small knife that had been used as a threat and held it with cold composure, immediately ordering that everyone be detained and taken to the police station. He firmly declared, "No one touches Emily, no matter who it is." As the men were led away, Rochelle tried to hide her humiliation but couldn't resist one last provocation. She yelled that Emily only received protection because of Ethan. Trying to appear superior, she claimed Emily was a disgrace. Ethan immediately turned to face her, his expression filled with contempt. "The woman you insulted is my wife, and I don't need to justify to anyone why I'm by her side," he declared, his voice sharp and definitive. Emily was paralyzed. Ethan's words echoed in her mind like an unexpected revelation. "The woman you insulted is my wife." For the first time she felt something different. More than shock or relief, it was a mix of warmth and security that hit her hard, something she didn't dare admit. Later on the way home, Ethan asked if she was okay. His concern was evident, and he didn't hide his protective tone. When he mentioned Emily's hair, noting that something seemed off, she tried to deflect the subject with trivial excuses about the wind. But her guilty expression was clear. Despite not pressing her, Ethan remained worried. He confirmed several times if Emily had eaten anything, observing that she looked pale. Emily felt the weight of her guilt increase. Ethan always took care of her, despite all the emotional barriers she erected between them. Suddenly, she held his hand, surprising even herself, before suggesting they eat together. This unexpected gesture caught Ethan off guard. He playfully questioned if Emily had a new plan. She smiled, ironically replying that it would be temporary and that, the next day, everything would go back to normal. Ethan chuckled, but he noticed something different in her behavior. Despite the lightness of the moment, both knew that something deeper was changing between them. Emily questioned Ethan again about his reasons for insisting on maintaining their marriage. Her words carried more hesitation than she wanted to show. He, with his enigmatic and firm tone, replied that he wouldn't sign the divorce papers and that she would understand why at the right time, ending the conversation with a practical suggestion that they go to dinner together. As they walked side by side towards the restaurant, hands intertwined, Emily wrestled with her own thoughts. The doubts in her mind were relentless. Was it fair to keep lying to her husband? Was it truly necessary to push him away at all costs? However, Ethan's almost unshakable calm and the firmness in every word made her feel increasingly disoriented, unable to define the feelings that were beginning to stir within her. Later, when Emily went to the restaurant's restroom, something unexpected happened. As she washed her hands, a familiar voice reached her, coming from a nearby table. She cautiously exited the restroom, her steps slowing as she recognized Nathan, seated with two other men. He spoke expansively, with broad gestures and an air of arrogance emanating from every word. Emily kept a safe distance, positioning herself discreetly so as not to be noticed, while giving her full attention to the conversation. Derek, one of the men at the table, directly asked Nathan if he had managed to get hold of Ethan's future projects. Nathan, with a superior smile, confessed that he was getting closer to that goal, but he still needed to deal with some complications. Elias, the other man, wanted to know if such complications included Emily. Nathan laughed scornfully, replying that Emily wasn't exactly the problem. The biggest obstacle was that she had realized too quickly that he had been manipulating Ethan and stealing his designs. Nathan's words slowed time in Emily's head. Her heart pounded with anger and worry, but she remained still, controlling herself to hear more. He continued, confessing that Ethan was his real target, as he was counting on the fact that his brother was emotionally tied to the idea of maintaining family peace. This blindness would be the key to easily manipulating Ethan. Emily knew she needed to act, but she decided to record the conversation on her phone before taking any rash action. Elias soon asked about their father and why he seemed to continue favoring Ethan. Nathan's answer made Emily clench her jaw. He, in a glacial tone, admitted that Antonio believed the fire years ago had been Ethan's fault, when in truth it had been Nathan who caused everything. He guffawed, calling it a necessary strategic error to keep up appearances. Derek, shocked, asked if Nathan had really put his brother's life at risk. Nathan, indifferent, shrugged and explained that no one would ever know the truth, as he completely controlled the narrative. When Derek brought up Emily again, asking if she wasn't a threat, Nathan chuckled coldly. He called her easily manipulated and implied she didn't even know what was going on, saying that using her was part of his plans. Emily, her blood boiling, decided to end her observation. She grabbed her coffee and, on purpose, spilled some of the drink onto Nathan's table as she walked past. Nathan shot up, furious, demanding an explanation. Emily leaned in slightly, a defiant smile on her face, and whispered to him in a low but threatening tone, "Enjoy what you have, Nathan. Your time is coming, because tomorrow everything could fall apart." She walked away with firm steps, leaving Nathan stunned, trying to grasp the gravity of what he'd just heard. Later that same night, Emily returned home carrying the weight of what she had witnessed and recorded. Entering, she spotted Ethan calmly swimming in the pool. Before he could notice her worried expression, Emily quickly put on her wig and mask, resuming her daily disguise. She called the housekeeper, asking how long Ethan had been there. "He seems deep in thought," the employee replied. Emily nodded, recognizing the same unshakable calm Ethan displayed, even under great pressure. This intrigued her and, in a way, she admired it. Sitting on a nearby lounge chair, Emily watched as Ethan emerged from the pool. Droplets of water ran down his body, and for a moment, Emily realized her attention was fixed on him. When Ethan noticed her, he offered an amused smile, sensing her nervousness. "Enjoying the view?" he teased, leaning down to grab a towel. Emily rolled her eyes, quickly looking away. "Not really," she replied defensively, trying to hide her discomfort. Ethan chuckled as he dried his hair and casually asked where she had been that afternoon. Emily hesitated, but replied that she needed some alone time to organize her thoughts. As he sat beside her, Emily decided to change the focus of the conversation. "Do you think one day things can really be resolved between you and Nathan?" she asked seriously. Ethan was visibly surprised and remained silent for a few seconds. She continued to gaze at him as she sipped her juice, waiting for an answer. Finally, he sighed deeply before speaking. "I'm not sure," he confessed. "I think I've been carrying a burden since the accident. I feel like I owe him." His words only fueled Emily's growing frustration. She shook her head with a half-ironic smile. "You're blind, Ethan. Your need for reconciliation makes you ignore the evidence that he's just taking advantage of you." Ethan frowned at the accusation, not hiding his discomfort. "Why are you asking me these things?" he retorted, clearly intrigued by her persistence. Emily leaned back in her chair, her expression now more serious. Despite hiding her deeper concerns with a smile, she knew the reason behind her questions. Ethan was a man worth protecting, not just because he was her husband, but because he had proven to be a pillar of strength and patience for her, even amidst the barriers she herself built between them. "I'm your wife, Ethan. I want to know what's on your mind because I want to make sure no one hurts you behind your back," she finally replied, with some honesty mixed into her calm tone. Ethan's face relaxed. His expression softened as he looked at her. A small smile appeared on his lips. "Are you worried about me now?" he asked playfully, raising an eyebrow. Emily disguised her emotions, shrugging. "Maybe so. Maybe not," she replied evasively, avoiding delving into what she truly felt. Ethan remained silent, but his eyes never left hers. There was something in his expression that made Emily feel vulnerable and, at the same time, cherished. He waited patiently as she tried to find the right words. It was as if he knew that this moment was too important to be rushed. Finally, Emily let out a sigh, gathering the courage to continue. "I realize that no matter how much I've tried to run, I can't ignore how complete I feel when I'm by your side. I always wanted to believe this marriage was a mistake, but now..." She hesitated, feeling the weight of the words she was about to say. "Now I see I was wrong." Ethan's lips curved into a soft smile, but he remained silent, letting her continue. For him, hearing those words was more important than any response he could give at that moment. "It was while I was trying to push you away, Ethan, that I realized I started falling in love with you," Emily admitted, her voice almost a whisper. Ethan moved closer, his posture calm and comforting as always. He stood before her for a few seconds, absorbing what he had just heard. "Emily, I never wanted you to feel this way. Like someone who needs to run or hide," he replied, his voice low but filled with emotion. "What I always wanted was for you to understand that by your side is where I want to be." Emily looked away, feeling her emotions raw. It was hard for her to accept that someone like Ethan could say such things with such sincerity. He, with so many qualities and virtues, seemed so distant from the chaotic world she felt existed within herself. "I wanted to reject you in every way," she confessed, nervously holding her own hands, "because I always thought you were with me out of obligation. An agreement, nothing more." Ethan shook his head slightly disappointed, but not with her, rather with the fact that she had carried that perception for so long. "It wasn't obligation, Emily. Never was. No matter how we started, what matters is how we choose to stay." They were silent for a moment, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a necessary pause, laden with all the words that didn't need to be spoken. Ethan finally smiled faintly, breaking the tension. "So, you're not going to try to push me away anymore?" Emily let out a nervous laugh, but there was no sarcasm or irony. It was a sincere laugh, with the lightness of someone who was finally beginning to accept what she felt. "I guess not," she replied, a timid smile on her face. "I guess it would be useless after all." "I agree," Ethan said teasingly, but his eyes full of affection. Later that night, Emily stood in her room, facing the mirror. For the first time in a long while, she removed the mask and wig she had used as barriers to protect her heart. As she stared at her reflection, she saw not just her clear face, but also the woman who was beginning to accept her true essence. Her wavy, loose hair framed her face naturally. Her eyes, once so insecure, now contemplated something she had begun to build within herself: confidence. "Today I'm going to be honest," she murmured to herself, lightly touching the mirror. "Ethan deserves that from me." Across the room, Clark, her brother, watched her with curiosity. He sat comfortably, arms crossed, but with a playful smile on his face. Nathan chuckled, but this time with a hint of nervousness. "I can ruin your life, Emily, just like I ruined his." As he said this, he grabbed her arm tightly, trying to intimidate her. But Emily held his gaze, even as she felt the pain. "Risky to say that out loud, don't you think?" Emily replied with a sly smile. "Because that's a good sign you know you're losing." Nathan began to sweat, visibly nervous. He raised his hand as if to make another threat, but Emily delivered the final blow. "I know what you did, Nathan. I heard everything at the restaurant. About the fire. About the accident. Ethan's going to find out everything. And when he does, you'll have nothing left." Nathan's eyes widened and he yelled, "Don't test my patience." Before he could finish his sentence, he pulled a gun on Emily, who, even then, wasn't intimidated. At that instant, the door burst open. Ethan entered, with 2 armed guards behind him. His firm voice echoed through the room. "Drop the weapon, Nathan." Nathan hesitated, then slowly lowered the gun. "Ethan, don't believe her. We're brothers," he pleaded with false urgency. "Don't call me brother. Now that I know who you really are, everything has changed." The guards moved to restrain him, but Nathan, in a desperate act, fired the gun before being subdued. Ethan fell to the floor, clutching his blood-stained abdomen. Emily knelt, crying and pressing on the wound. "Stay with me, Ethan. Please." Even wounded, Ethan tried to reassure her with a gentle smile. "I'll always be with you, Emily." Everything happened quickly, with an ambulance arriving to take him to the hospital. Hours later, in the hospital room, Emily held Ethan's hand as he slowly opened his eyes. "You stayed the whole time?" he asked, his voice weak. "Always. And I'll continue to be here. Because I love you, Ethan." And with that simple yet true confession, the two exchanged a smile laden with emotion, knowing their love had just overcome another battle. Ethan smiled faintly at Emily's words, but his face still carried the shadow of everything that had happened. He held her hand as if seeking support, a gesture that conveyed the mix of emotions overwhelming him at that moment. I never wanted to believe Nathan was capable of this, he said in a low tone, almost to himself. I guess I spent so much time trying to save something that, deep down, was already destroyed. Emily gently squeezed his hand, her words firm and comforting, trying to ease the weight of the painful memories. Ethan, the mistake isn't in trusting or believing in someone you love. The mistake was his for betraying that trust. You don't have to carry the blame for his choices. Ethan's sigh was long, as if he were trying to expel years of accumulated disillusionment. Thank you, Emily. Not just for this, but for being here. And for being so you despite everything. He gave a weak smile, but there was sincerity in his gaze. I couldn't be anywhere else, Emily replied, revealing a vulnerability she rarely showed. The moment between them was calm, but full of meaning. She knew that, despite everything they had been through, there was something unbreakable in the relationship they were building. It wasn't just about conventions or obligations, but something genuine. Ethan looked at her again, his eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and inevitable curiosity. How did you know all this? I mean, what exactly happened? He asked, now more alert though still tired. Emily took a deep breath, trying to organize the events in her mind before starting to explain. I was at the restaurant a few days ago, Ethan. Nathan was there with 2 men, and I ended up hearing him confess everything. He was bragging about stealing your projects, thinking you'd never notice. And he mentioned the fire. Emily hesitated for a moment, holding his gaze before continuing. It was him, Ethan. Nathan started that fire. He knew you were in the building, and even so, he did what he did. Ethan closed his eyes for an instant, the pain of the discovery hitting him again. He didn't answer immediately, but Emily could see the muscles in his jaw clench as he processed what he had just heard. She then added, in an attempt to soften the impact, I knew I needed to be sure before talking to you. That's why I recorded what he said. Have proof, Ethan. The police have also been informed. This won't go unpunished. Ethan opened his eyes, still clear, but now filled with a firm severity. And yet you faced him alone. He pointed a gun at you, Emily. The words came out firmer, showing the evident concern in his voice. I did what I had to do. I wasn't going to let him get away with it without consequences, Emily replied with conviction. And I knew deep down that you needed to know all this. I didn't want you to keep putting faith in someone who only wants to destroy you. Ethan observed her in silence, as if he were looking at someone he was finally beginning to understand completely. There was something in her presence, in the strength she demonstrated, that made him feel a growing mixture of respect and admiration. Finally, he shook his head with a small smile. I guess I should have realized how determined you are sooner. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes briefly before adding, Thank you for not giving up on me, even when it seemed easier. Emily looked away for a moment, trying to hide the blush creeping up her face, but replied with an honesty that caught her off guard. I guess for the first time, Ethan, I'm learning that being strong also means being willing to fight for what matters. He smiled, this time wider, as if those words were the confirmation of something he had suspected for a long time. So, we're finally on the same page, he replied, holding her hand again. A few days later, Ethan had recovered enough to return home, and the tension left by the events slowly, little by little, began to dissipate. Emily remained by his side the entire time, ensuring he had what he needed, in an exchange that was both natural and emotionally genuine. One afternoon, as they both sat in the garden, Ethan looked at her with a lighter air. "You know everything will be different now, don't you?" he asked. Emily raised her eyebrows, curious. "Different how?" Ethan smiled faintly, the confident sparkle that always characterized him slowly returning. "No masks, no barriers. I want to live this with you, Emily. I want it to be real. For both of us." Emily's heart squeezed for an instant before she nodded. It was a new beginning, something that scared her, but that she was finally ready to embrace. Ethan took her hand in a gesture as firm as it was affectionate. "I promise you, Emily, no matter what happens from now on, I'll be by your side. And now, for the first time, I feel like you want the same." Emily smiled, and this time it was a brilliant smile, free from the weight she carried. "I do, Ethan. More than I ever imagined before." And so, in that garden, under the soft light of the late afternoon, they began to rebuild something that, despite all adversities, promised to be true and lasting. Ethan slowly relaxed, as if Emily's words had lifted a weight from his shoulders. Ethan's admiration translated into a genuine smile. He thanked Emily, sparking her curiosity. When she asked why, he replied with true gratitude. It was for her not giving up. Despite all the reasons Emily could supposedly have to choose another path, she stayed. She stayed to protect him, to take care of everything that was important. Emily looked away, trying to organize her own feelings in the face of his words. She tried to mask her nervousness, but her hands betrayed her vulnerability. In a softer voice, she confessed that, despite everything, she had always worried about him. Ethan was someone she trusted and wanted to protect, especially against Nathan's selfish intentions. Lightly, Ethan took the cue to tease and lighten the atmosphere. He asked a question that caught her off guard. Did this mean she was changing her mind about them? Emily felt her resistance waver. She took a deep breath and, without realizing it, held his hand with a naturalness that began to show how much that moment affected her. After gathering the necessary courage, she let slip something she had long avoided admitting. For so long she tried to push him away, believing he might be naive for tolerating so much indifference. But, reflecting on everything, she realized that the naivety was on her side, for not having valued the incredible man he had always been. Ethan, hearing this, squeezed her hand with a big, warm smile. "So that means you're not going to try to end our marriage anymore?" he asked in a teasing tone, but with his eyes fixed on hers, waiting for an honest answer. Emily leaned in slightly, touching his face tenderly and admitting that she had finally understood something important. She wanted to stay by his side. Ethan wasn't just her husband out of obligation. He was someone who made her life worthwhile and made her happier than she could imagine. Ethan's gaze was pure admiration, almost as if he were seeing his own happiness reflected in her. He could barely contain his emotion as he asked, his voice low and full of sincerity, if Emily was serious. She chuckled softly, confirming that being his wife was not just a good thing, but something that made her feel safe, loved, and complete. For a brief moment, their worlds seemed to converge on that instant. Both knew they still had many things from the past to overcome, but together they found enough strength to face any challenge. Years later, sunlight glistened on the golden sand of the beach, as the sound of waves gently broke in the background. The scene was one of pure tranquility and joy. Emily sat in a folding chair, camera in hand, laughing affectionately at the twins, Haley and Dylan, who ventured into the waves under Ethan's guidance. "Be careful this time," Emily yelled, laughing as she filmed. Her children shot playful glances in her direction. Haley responded with her usual sweet smile, balancing confidently on her board and waving warmly at her mom. Emily paused the recording, watching her family with tenderness. Ethan was with them, helping, encouraging, and even when the children fell, always ready to pick them up with patience and laughter. There was something moving about seeing him parent with such affection, something that filled Emily's heart with pride and gratitude. "Are you hungry again?" Emily asked, gesturing towards the table under the umbrella as she smiled. Dylan yelled back, laughing, "Yes, the ocean makes you super hungry." Emily laughed with them and pointed to the table. "Run. There's fruit, chicken, and the carbonara you love," she announced. In an instant, Haley ran to her, gave her a loving kiss on the cheek, and mumbled a "Thanks, Mom" before heading for the meal. Ethan came out of the water next, his hair messy and his skin tanned, displaying a carefree smile. He approached Emily, shaking the excess sand from his feet before sitting beside her. "Are you watching me again?" he asked playfully, displaying that natural charm Emily knew so well. "Of course I am," she replied, leaning slightly forward with a smile on her face. "And you should eat something too." Ethan leaned down towards her, close to her ear, and with a teasing tone said, "Later I plan to tire you out in a different way." Emily laughed, gently pushing him away as she blushed. "Ethan!" she exclaimed, amused. They both laughed together, feeling as light and connected as they had ever been. Ethan planted a quick kiss on her face before getting up to grab something to eat. Emily let her eyes return to the children, who were now playing in the sand. Looking back, she knew she had never imagined a life like that. Being a mother and a wife brought challenges she hadn't foreseen, but also a happiness that surpassed all expectations. With Ethan by her side, she felt empowered to overcome any difficulty. Ethan returned and gently took Emily's hand. "Ready to head back to the city?" he asked as he looked at her with affection. "The kids are excited to start school," he explained. Emily sighed before responding, looking out at the sea again. It would be hard to leave this place that had given them so many happy memories. But something inside her told her new challenges and memories were on their way. "Yes, I'm ready," she replied, smiling faintly. "I feel like we're starting a new chapter." Ethan gave a warm smile, hugging her affectionately and whispering, "With you by my side, every chapter will be amazing." Emily leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder, returning the embrace as she watched the day end. The sun painted the sky with warm colors, and the children's little moments of laughter and play filled the air with joy. With her eyes closed, Emily offered a silent prayer, thankful for everything they had built together. An unshakable love, a united family, and the certainty that they had overcome the impossible to get to this point. That peace in her heart was proof of the strength they had gained together. Years passed, And the idea of family only grew stronger for Emily and Ethan. Even the broken bonds between Ethan and Nathan began to mend. After completing therapy abroad, Nathan was trying to redeem himself, and the relationship between the brothers slowly reached a cordial balance. For Emily, who saw the emotional weight lifted from her husband, this brought a quiet comfort. One day, while watching the twins play, Emily chuckled as she confessed, "I still don't want Haley and Dylan to grow up. I wish they could be our little babies forever." Ethan smiled conspiratorially, putting his arm around his wife's waist. "Then I guess the solution is simple. Make 2 more babies for you to take care of." Emily laughed out loud, pulling away slightly as she playfully punched his arm. "Ethan, you're impossible. Let's wait a bit longer. Maybe when they're older." Ethan raised an eyebrow with a playful look. "So, does that mean it's in the cards?" Emily, with a smile on her face, slowly shook her head. "Who knows?" she replied vaguely, though she knew she loved the idea of an even fuller house. She adored the energy of hearing the children's laughter, their games around the house, and the warmth of a family she and Ethan had built together. Ethan pulled her close again, wrapping his arm firmly around her waist, and murmured, "Thank you for bringing them into our world." Emily looked at him, her eyes shining through a silence heavy with emotion. Her voice was softer but full of sincerity. "And thank you for creating a world where they can grow up safely and with so much love." As the day gave way to late afternoon, Ethan called the twins, who ran to them with wide smiles and endless energy. Dylan, his face lit up by the vibrant hues of the sunset, commented, full of enthusiasm, "Mommy, look how beautiful the sky is. It looks like the sun doesn't even want to leave." Haley, holding her parents' hands tightly, added with a sweet smile, "Tomorrow will be another beautiful day, won't it?" Emily felt her heart warm even more. She watched her children beside her and Ethan holding her hand. In that instant, she realized the depth of what they had built together. A family full of love, patience, and complicity. It was a life she had never imagined, but one that now felt like a dream she never wanted to wake from. Lightly, she leaned into Ethan and whispered in his ear, "Thank you for never giving up on me. I love you." Ethan's smile was peaceful but full of meaning. He replied without hesitation, "I love you too. Thank you for giving me this family." The two sat close, their children nestled against their legs as the sunset painted the sky in golden tones and the sound of the sea created a perfect soundtrack. It was an instant of singular beauty, a moment that seemed to encapsulate everything they had overcome. Emily knew that, in the future, she would look back on those memories with fondness and tenderness. Photos of the children learning to surf, afternoons playing in the sand, and family dinners would bring smiles and wistful sighs when she and Ethan were older. In the present moment, however, every second seemed too precious. "Do you think we made it?" Emily asked with a gentle smile as she looked at Ethan with gratitude. Ethan held her hand, squeezing it lightly. "We always made it, Emily. The only difference is that now we finally realize it." The two laughed together, a genuine laugh shared by those who, after so many difficulties, had found something deeper. Emily leaned towards him, sharing a serene kiss under the warm lights of dusk. All the masks had fallen. There were no more secrets or lies. What remained was a true love, made of patience, forgiveness, and trust. It was the solid foundation of a family that promised to stay united forever. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like and share it with those who need a message of love and overcoming. Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell to follow more incredible and emotional stories like this one. We are grateful for you being part of our journey. Thank you for being with us.